Credit on UPI was something that was launched with a lot of fanfare in September during the Global FinTech Festival by NPCI. But despite the promise, credit on UPI is not really picked up. I mean, it's already been 9 months, and we still have only five banks and four third party app providers that are still enabled to provide the service of credit on UPI. Some of the reasons behind this could be, the absence of a defined interchange for credit on UPI, along with a bunch of other concerns. The primary one being the cannibalization of credit card balances by most of the large issuers. But apart from that as well, I think it's very interesting a juncture where we are at today, because recently the NPCI had come up with this very interesting circular where they were speaking about the entire credit on UPI wave that's going on over there. And they had launched a bunch of new features to the existing credit line already. So I'm just reading out the circular over here, and this refers back to the original credit on UPI circular, which said that RuPay credit cards and prepaid credit line pre-sanctioned credit lines can now be enabled on UPI, and this enables a safe and secure payment transaction via UPI. This entire feature has provided users with the ease and increased opportunity to use their credit cards and pre-sanctioned credit lines, and the merchants to have benefited by increase in consumption simply by being a part of the credit card ecosystem with the acceptance of credit accounts using their QR codes. Now, they're further enriching this feature by introducing three new features. The first one is that of EMI payments. So, users shall now be able to apply for EMI facility on the linked credit accounts on their UPI app. Now, as a form of consent for the entire EMI that the customer is getting into, what the UPI app needs to do is to take the user's PIN as an explicit consent, and this will allow the users to do two things. One, they can go into all their past purchases and convert those into an EMI as well from their transaction history, or the current payment that they're making. They can convert that too into EMI payments. Now, the next feature, which is also, I've been seeing this on my UPI app for a while now, which is credit account bill payment or paying those in installments. Now, this shall enable users to make a one-time payment setup or set up UPI auto pay as well to pay the outstanding credit card amount uh, or any of the credit lines that they have for their self using their UPI app. Now, to do this as well, the payer PSP. So, if I'm making the payment, the payer, my PSP, shall create the UPI ID for receiving the credit account or credit bill that's there to be credited or the installment payment. The UPI app shall provide a view of all the details that are linked to the credit card bill that's there. So typically this involves your minimum amount due, total amount due, due date, etc., etc. And the issuer bank shall clear the dues in real time. And once the dues have been cleared, the balance shall be made available for the customer to use immediately. Now, coming to the third feature, which is limit usage. So, users shall be able to accept or apply for enhancing their credit limits. This feature, in case you have any emergencies or some seasonal spends like festive seasons, typically in Indian families come with a lot of extra spends. Then the issuing bank can start, and the benefit of this is that while the issuing bank can start off with a small credit line, based on the user's past spending behavior, subsequently they can start increasing the credit limit. So this is going to be a huge boost for thin book credit customers over there. So these are the three features that are going to be available to all of us as soon as 31st of May. So that's exactly what spurred this entire discussion on credit on UPI. But before we get into all of that, I would like to give all of you a very warm welcome to this weekly podcast. I am Kamalika, your host, and I also go by the pen name of the FinTech Chronicler. And while my FinTech Chronicler newsletter has been running for about 3 years now, I've recently started doing these community podcasts as well, where we take one interesting FinTech topic, get into the depth of it, and try understanding it from a holistic perspective and engage in a dialogue with each other so that we can together learn a lot more about the topic. So, the way that I've structured today's topic is that we'll first start off by talking a little about credit card network so that we have an understanding of how that works and some of the checks and balances that credit card networks currently have. Then we'll go on to seeing how UPI works, and we'll then merge both of them to understand how credit on UPI works, understand some of the challenges and the benefits from all of that. Also, at any point in time, if you feel that, I'm probably not making sense to you, or you have a differing experience or a opinion over there, feel free to raise your hand and I will definitely bring you up on stage. And the more we interact and the more we question each other, the better we're all going to end up learning from each other. So let's get started with that. So the first things first, how does the credit card payment currently work? Now for this, I actually had to do a lot of work, but I was finally able to find this old GIF of mine that I had created, which I called the Manic Network. So Manic literally stands for Merchant Acquiring Bank, network, N for credit card network, I for the issuing bank, and C for the customer. Now, because I am recording it, on my recording, you're going to be able to see the entire Manic network. But then, yes, for everyone who's joining in from the LinkedIn audio room, I am going to be kind of narrating it as the GIF plays along. So let's imagine you have a customer who comes into a shop and wants to make a transaction. Now, the shopkeeper would typically provide them their QR code, or if it's a credit card payment, the POS machine that's there. This POS is typically issued by a PSP or a payment service provider. Now, this payment service provider or this POS machine reads the card detail, figures out whom the card belongs to, the network to which this card belongs to, and sends all of the transaction detail to the card network. Now, how do PSPs find out which card network it belongs to? It's pretty simple. Typically, the first digit of the card that you have is a giveaway for what network it belongs to. If it's a 4, it probably belongs to Visa. If it's a 5, it belongs to MasterCard. 3 is for Diners, 7 is for Amex, and 6 is for RuPay, I think. But I will still have to check out 6 and 7 for Amex and RuPay. I might be interchanging the two over there. Anyways, all of this information, the PSP then figures out and sends the card details and the transaction details to the card network. The card network's job is then to identify which is the bank that has issued this particular card to the customer and send all of the information related to this transaction to the issuing bank. The card network does this because the issuing bank needs to then authorize and authenticate this particular customer and figure out if they can actually go ahead with this transaction or not. Now, once the card issuing network figures out, the bank that's issued the card figures out that yes, this is a legit transaction, they then send that information to the card network that, okay, we shall be debiting this particular customer's account, and we'll make sure that, the bank to which it has to be, that's associated with the payment service provider, we send the money over there via the nationalized clearing house that's there. As soon as the card network gets this information, this okay, go ahead signal, it sends it back to the payment service provider, who acknowledges it and generates the receipt for the transaction. Now, this ends the entire payment transaction process. The next step that takes place is the settlement process or the movement of the money. Now, what happens is the issuing bank would have figured out, basis the PSP's details that were passed on, which was the account that acquired, the bank that acquired this particular merchant that's there. And the settlement then happens, the amount that has to go from the issuing bank to the acquiring bank at the end of the day, then it happens at that point in time. It sends the money to the acquiring bank at the end of the day through the clearing house, the national clearing house that's there. And instantaneously, the acquiring bank, as soon as it gets that credit from the issuing bank, also settles the merchant's account at that point in time. Now, this is all dandy when it comes to a debit card, because the customer's account is what gets debited at the issuing bank's end. What happens when it is actually a credit card account? This is where it slightly gets a little tricky, because a credit card essentially means that the issuing bank is taking up the onus of making sure they make that payment from their account for that interim period. When you clear your credit card dues for the month is when it actually goes out of your account. So till then, the onus entirely lies with the issuing bank to make all of the payments. So all the money that goes out actually goes out from the issuing bank. And what happens is the credit line that you are given as a customer, that keeps reducing till you reach like zero. When you reach a zero, it means that you have no more credit left with the issuing bank as per the appetite that they have for you. And that's when transactions start failing on the credit card network. And at the end of the month, the issuing bank that's there generates a credit card statement and sends it to you. When you clear that amount is when it goes back to the issuing bank's pool account that they maintain at their end. So this is how credit card works. Now you can understand why it becomes a little tricky over here, because the bank is essentially taking the risk of your non-payment for those particular transactions over here. So they have to do a lot of checks and balances, a lot of anti-money laundering, fraud detection, and really heavy sets of checks just to make sure that they're underwriting the right set of customers and are able to figure out the customer's willingness and ability to pay. It's not just, their ability to pay a loan over there, which is why in this entire processing that happens, typically banks and the card networks charge something known as a merchant discount rate. Now, the merchant discount rate, let's say you've made 1,000 rupees purchase from a merchant and the merchant discount rate was at about a 2.5%. Then ultimately, the merchant is actually not going to get that entire 1,000 rupees over there, but it's going to get 1,000 minus that 2.5%, which comes up to what? 9750. It comes up to 975.0 rupees. What was that? 0.04. Anyways, so that 2.5%, that merchant discount rate, a part of it, a huge part of it goes to the issuing bank for taking up that credit risk that's there. Another part of it goes to the card networks for enabling this entire, two different banks, the issuing bank and the acquiring bank, to talk to each other. Then a third part of it goes to the payment service provider that enables merchants to accept these various different types of transactions. And the last part of it goes to the acquiring bank as well for providing these services to the merchant. So a bunch of things that actually goes into the MDR. It's not really a random number that card networks or issuing banks charge just to make a profit. They have to do a lot of these. It's a very expensive process for them as well, which is why, it kind of gets charged over there at the end of the day. So that's a little bit about merchant discount rate. I just want to take a quick pause to see if I'm still making sense or if I just went way too fast for all of you. If it makes sense, do give me a thumbs up and we shall then be on our way. Or if you want me to repeat something, then please do. Yes, like Saral is coming up on stage. If you have anything to add, then please do let us know. Hi, Saral, go for it. First, please do introduce yourself. And yes, if you have any points that you would like to add here, please go ahead. Whoops, it looks like we lost Saral. All right, when he's back, we shall also be back with this as well. Now, moving on to how UPI makes money. Or rather, how UPI works over here. So UPI, like we saw right now in the case of the card networks, MasterCard and Visa, this is where NPCI kind of sits. And NPCI has another additional, apart from the entire payment transaction processing, NPCI is also responsible for issuing that virtual private address as well, or maintaining those virtual private addresses as well at their end. So they're able to figure out which is the remitter bank in this case, which is the beneficiary bank in this case. But before we get into that, I think I should also spend just about a brief amount of time in explaining the different participants that are there in the entire card or the UPI payment transaction network that's there. So there are basically 5 participants. First is NPCI, who acts as the owner, network operator, service provider, and the coordinator for the entire UPI network. Then there are a couple of different types of banks. One is the payer bank. The payer bank is basically where the customer's UPI account is linked. Then there's a payee PSP bank, or the bank where the UPI ID of the merchant is linked. There is another bank which is known as the remitter bank. Now the remitter bank is, now suppose it's Kamalika's account that's being debited, then it's the bank that holds Kamalika's savings account, that is the remitter bank. And finally you have the beneficiary bank, which is the merchant's account that is going to be credited at the end of the transaction. This is the four different types of banks that come into play over here. Then, of course, there's the customer, the merchant, as well as third party app providers who enable this entire transaction to happen. These third party apps can be a Google Pay, can be a Phone Pay, or recently even Paytm has gotten a TPAP license. So, yes, these are like the five broad players that's there. NPCI acts as, like we mentioned, the owner, network operator, service provider, coordinator for the entire UPI network. And NPCI reserves the right to either operate and maintain the UPI network on its own or provide and operate any necessary services through third party app providers. NPCI also provides and maintains the network infrastructure, maintains the uptime, and ensures timely settlements to banks as well. Frequently, NPCI also undertakes revisions to the UPI architecture and provides procedural guidelines like the one that we saw on the entire new features that they're going to be enabling on credit on UPI. And all certifications that are required to operate as either a PSP or as a third party app provider, all of these are also provided by NPCI. So these are some of the broad functions that are there on NPCI. Now, what do you think? What can be some of the issues or some of the challenges that are there when it comes to credit cards payment or credit payment via an UPI? Any takers for that? Okay. Yes, we do have Nilesh and Amit on stage with us. Hi Nilesh, hi Amit, how are you doing? Nilesh, we'll start off with you. Why don't you give us an introduction, introduce yourself, and yes, let me know your views on what you think the potential challenges and the benefits are.
Yeah, hi everyone. I am basically a business consultant and I do help startups to grow. So coming back to the point of today, I was hearing your views and I really get to know so many things about, especially about the credit payments on UPI. So I really want to ask you one thing. Like for
Hmm.
example, like someone's credit limit is 1 lakh a month or something like that. So how much percentage the credit card company is going to charge around a payment of 50,000 to 1 lakh, like if somebody makes, or otherwise it's just like you mentioned, at a 1,000 payment, if the discount rate is 2.5%,
Hmm.
then that 25 bucks goes to company who is issuing that credit card, issuing bank. So I'm a little confused over there. If you can give me a little clarity.
Okay, so that kind of varies from it's a mix. It's a mix of the kind of credit card you have. If it's a higher variant credit card where your benefits are a lot more, then the MDR is going to be a lot more over there. And it also depends on the network on which you are on. Typically, networks like an Amex or a Diners charge a higher percentage versus that of a Visa or a MasterCard, and RuPay typically has the lowest MDR that's out there over there. I won't call it MDR, it's the interchange fees or the network fees that's there. Now, the split between the various entities, most of it, I wouldn't say most of it, but yes, a huge chunk of it goes to the issuing bank for taking care of the entire, for credit cards especially. They're taking the credit risk over there. They're also responsible for making sure that the AML and fraud checks are in place, and they have to provision for bad loans as well. So they're taking up a chunk of the entire credit underwriting process, which is why a lot of the MDR or split of the MDR goes to the issuing bank. The next chunk kind of goes to the networks that's out there. So Visa, MasterCard, RuPay, all of them, they take a chunk of it as well. And finally, whatever is left, like about a 0.2 to a 0.5% at most, is what goes to the remitter, the acquiring bank and the payment service provider or whatever, the payment aggregators that they have over there. So payment aggregators make their margins are like really super thin, super thin. So 0.1%, 0.1, 0.8%, 0.18% is what they operate on. Sorry, was I able to answer your question?
Yeah, I believe, yeah, like almost. Uh, one more thing I really want to know, like, do you really feel like this actually can work at a good rate, in especially in India? Because
You're hitting the nail on, like, you're literally pointing out the nails that are there in the coffin and banging on them. So, when it comes to the entire NPCI network, as you know, UPI does not attract any MDR, which means the banks that are there are bearing the cost because they still have to pay that switching fee that's there to NPCI over here. Now, this has been like a huge debate, and I think one of the biggest reasons behind why we're not seeing a lot of adoption on credit on UPI is simply because there still isn't adequate clarity about what can be the MDR that we charge on these transactions. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons behind why a lot of banks, of course, they don't want to cannibalize their credit card product as well, right? So these are like two dichotomies. While on one end, you can get merchants who probably would not have gone for a typical card payment machine to start accepting credit payments. So you are increasing your the base of your credit users, while and at the same time thin book credit customers also can get access to small credit lines in the beginning. So your financial inclusion agenda is also working out over there. So it's like a two pronged thing. On one side, you have to make sure that the entities in the system are making enough money to support the ecosystem, and on the other side, you also have to make sure that you are increasing your base of credit penetration as well. Very interesting question. All right, Amitji, how are you doing? Very a warm welcome back to the podcast and over to you, sir. Please do give a brief introduction and we'll move on to your point as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kamalika, for this wonderful audio event. My name is Amit. Into wealth advisory business, as you might have known me, because we have also interacted in the past.
Absolutely.
I have two questions regarding the credit card. See, the thing is that I am using Visa and Master credit card, Mastercard credit card. But can you link these credit cards to UPI?
So, in addition to just having 5 banks and 4 UPI app providers, there's only one network alone, card network alone, that's enabled for credit cards on UPI, which is NPCI's own RuPay credit cards. So, to answer your question, no, we cannot do that. I also feel one of the reasons why NPCI is not allowed for other networks is a, of course, you do want to make sure that you have your own credit dominance out there in the credit card market, but B, it's a lot easier to kind of set the MDR for a new instrument like this if you also own the credit card network. So I think that's probably a reason as to why we still have not seen other card networks being allowed over here. But my hypothesis is down the road, I mean, I honestly don't think the Indian government has an option to keep gatekeeping other payment networks, other card networks from accessing this, Amitji.
Okay. And one more question I have. Do you think that the credit card industry will be dead after maybe after a few years down the line, seeing the UPI and IMPS transaction in the system?
So, this is basis one of the reports that I had read about the fintech industry. This was by Lightspeed Venture, and they strongly believe that credit card in the physical fashion that we know of is probably going to see a huge decline. And they've quoted a lot of data from the US where credit card issuance has been dipping drastically versus new user signups on BNPL platforms like a Klarna or an Affirm and all of those has been going up in tandem with the reduction in the new credit issued. This coupled with another interesting case study which Amazon had done on their Alexa enabled payments, which in the UK showed a huge uptick. And corresponding to that, the users were using Alexa based payments. Their credit card payments were also going down. So I do think that yes, the future is going to be physical cardless, but I don't think card networks or credit card product itself is going to go away. we're going to probably see it being revamped. And you can also see this in the kind of investments that MasterCard and Visa are making. For example, MasterCard and Visa have been spending a lot of money in figuring out how to tokenize all their customer base, how to tokenize all their merchants that are there, and enable those, either it's consumer to business payments or business to business payments via these tokens that are there instead of their cards. So no,
RBI has already started, right?
yes, correct. RBI has also started from last year. Mastercard and Visa have been doing this since 2020. Like they've been buying out. I think even recently, Visa bought out another startup that was doing a lot of these tokenization of alternative assets as well. So their focus is entirely on that. So I don't think credit card as a product is going to go away. We'll still be able to make payments using a credit line, but the form factor that we have, how the product is designed, is probably going to change.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Always a pleasure, Amit ji. All right, we also have Mohit with us, and the interesting thing is, Mohit also happens to be from the entire digital lending space. So, Mohit, very excited to have you here. A warm welcome to you, Mohit.
Hey, Kamalika, thank you so much for the quick intro. Likewise, happy to be here. I just had, a couple of questions here for you since you've been so much invested and researching on these things. Um, do you also see, RBI allowing NBFCs down the line to, bring out these kind of products, or do you think it will be limited to banks? Because I believe fintechs and NBFCs would be more than happy to pounce on such opportunities rather than worrying about, the MDR rates.
Yeah.
That's one of the questions.
Yeah. So, given the way our Honorable RBI Governor Shaktikant Das has been literally, uh, he's literally been taking the sledgehammer and coming behind anyone who's been taking way too many risky bets with unsecured credits. I don't think in the near future we will see RBI allowing anyone apart from the big banks taking on such this product, which could also explain why 9 months into the launch we still have just 5 banks on credit enabled UPI payments. It's going to be a very slow rollout for other entities. NBFCs, I don't think it's going to come for another 3 years at least. So for fintechs, it's going to take a lot more. But I do think why, and this is probably one of the reason why you see a lot of fintech companies nowadays applying for a TPAP license with NPCI, because the chances of you becoming a tech service provider for UPI and credit is probably higher than becoming a credit issuer over there. So it's my hypothesis, but I could be proved wrong. I do think that we will be expanding the number of TPAP UPI players rather than the number of issuers. Did that make sense, Mohit?
Understood. Understood. Yes, yes, yes. Thanks for those insights. The other question that I have on this one is, you spoke on the NDR and you spoke on the acceptance rate because of NDR, right?
Hmm.
So I'm thinking from the point of view of a let's say of a retailer who has a QR on his shop products, right?
Yeah.
So from the point of view of that merchant, today he is not able to pay any MDR because all these are UPI transactions and they do not attract any MDR.
Yeah.
And let's say, even if I as a customer pay to the merchant to my, credit line on UPI, it will still not attract any MDR.
Yeah.
Is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, because as a merchant, he is absolutely using a QR code.
Yeah.
And his understanding of the product is that this product that I have, the QR code, which I'm using to accept payments, will not have any charge.
Yeah, very interesting question. So, what the NPCI and RBI had previously said is that for credit card based UPI payments that are above 2000 rupees, it will attract an MDR of about, I think it was 1.2%, but I will really have to go back and recheck that number again. But it's of course less than the 2.5 that most merchants get charged for credit card payments. But for everything below 2000, you're not really going to see an MDR being charged over there, which means that your local kirana store or the golgappa bhaiya or the uncle from whom I get my sabzis every day, they are still, because my typical transaction size, the ticket sizes with them ranges from 100 to a 300 at most. They're not going to be seeing those MDRs being deducted at their end. However, that said, merchants on their TPAP apps also can enable or disable accepting of credit lines and credit card payments on their QR code. So they're giving the control via a consent, an explicit UPI PIN consent to the user, and via this usage consent on the acceptance controls at the merchants level as well. So I honestly, I do not think that a lot of these merchants, the small merchants that are there, they're not going to be impacted simply because their volumes are quite small. But that said, yes, they suddenly, a lot of them who do end up doing big businesses over there and are not as educated and as savvy as, say, a Reliance or Aditya Birla Mosh or something like that, when their ticket sizes start going up, they will take a hit over there.
Right. Thanks for your inputs.
But I'm just so glad that all of you asked these questions, because honestly, this was what I had in mind as well for what I wanted to cover on the disadvantages that's there associated with credit on UPI. I think the only part that I had in mind that I've not yet been able to cover is with respect to the risk underwriting over here. Now, in case of credit payments, the bank is the one who's taking the entire onus onto themselves to make sure that the payment, whatever the customer has made the transaction, they are making the payment, and it's up to them to figure out how to collect from them. Now, we've already seen in the case of banks like Kotak and a lot of other banks as well, where they have great digital channels, but even then, the KYCs and a lot of these fraud checks weren't as robust, because of which RBI has come knocking down on their doors. So if these tech first companies like Kotak or even fintechs like Paytm have not been able to master the entire art of collections via digital channels, can we rely on traditional banks to be able to do that in a robust fashion? That's a question that I really don't have any answers to. And another thing that I find a little confusing right now is that RBI has been very, very proactive in cutting down the risk that's there in the system. And anywhere that they see too much of unsecured credit going out to consumers, they've actually been doing a lot of stringent audit checks to these banks and asking a lot of tough questions and asking them to increase the provisioning that they're doing for a lot of these unsecured credits that's there. So that said, why are they so gung-ho about promoting small ticket credit lines to UPI customers? It seems like a dichotomy to me, because on one hand, you're saying you need to be financially prudent, banks need to be financially prudent. And on the other side, you're enabling new to credit customers to convert their small ticket payments into credit payments. That kind of does not make a lot of sense to me. But yes, I do think it's going to grow as well as how UPI is growing, simply because India is a credit starved nation. And if you are having a payment mechanism like UPI, which is pretty much ubiquitous by today's standard, and you're enabling it to also accept credit payments, then I think it's going to include the biggest benefit that I see is that it is going to help in financial inclusion. And just to give like a little bit of a start over here, so when it comes to the payments that were processed by the network, by NPCI, uh, where was that data point? So last, this is from March 2024. Phone Pay, there was a total of about 19 lakh crore rupees of transaction value through the entire UPI network, of which Phone Pay had about 10 lakh crores, so a little above 50% went to Phone Pay. Google Pay had about 6.9 lakh crores. Paytm had 1.3 crores, a lot of it, which was not a lot, I would say about 0.2%, 0.1% came in, 0.2% came in from their payment bank business, which is going to take a hit this month. The fourth player to me, which was very interesting, sitting at 45,000 crores, was Cred. Now, Cred, I think they've also applied for, by the way, a payment gateway license, and they've recently been given an in principle approval. They are very well positioned to tap into the entire credit on UPI piece over here, because they have an entire merchant discovery platform. These are merchants which typically generate a high ticket size transaction from their consumers. They're consumers who are people who are, they've been using a credit card, or at least have a very good credit score. So they're credit prudent customers with a good disposable income are also on their platform. So I think the one entity, apart from, of course, RuPay, who's going to benefit from the entire credit on UPI, I think Cred is going to be one entity that's going to benefit from this, because I can see a lot of their payments actually being above 2000. And if they're enabling credit payments at the rate at which they are, then yes, I think they're going to probably find a sweet spot over there. But with that said, that's about all that I had planned for today's episode of the entire FinTech Chroniclers Credit on UPI event. If there is anything else that anyone else would like to add, the stage is still yours.
Kamalika, I just wanted to ask you one question.
Yes, please go for it.
Amit here.
Yes.
See, I suppose the Tata Pay also, they have also received some license from the NPCI. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't remember, but I think they've also applied for a TPAP license.
What is the TPAP license?
Oh, I'm so sorry. TPAP is, it actually stands for third party app provider. So these are basically tech platforms like a Phone Pay or a Google Pay who enable UPI payments on their app.
Okay,
So
alright.
Tata Neo already has, like, an entire super app of theirs that they're building out there. And this TPAP will add that UPI layer on natively on their app itself. So they don't need to integrate with a Paytm or a Google Pay or a Phone Pay. They can create UPI handles on their app itself, and the entire ecosystem, whatever transactions you do, happens within the Tata ecosystem itself.
Okay. Basically, I used Tata Neo only.
Ah.
Flipkart and Amazon.
Yeah, correct, exactly. So all your transactions, all your payments will now happen via Tata Pay itself, on the Tata platform itself.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Hey, Kamalika. So, just wanted to add something on the point
Absolutely.
you mentioned. There's a dichotomy uh, where you're talking about, risk, right?
Yeah.
So, the way I look at credit on UPI, and the way I understand this is that this is more of a distribution technology rather than a acquisition technology. Wherein, if somebody has a credit line, a pre-sanctioned credit line from the bank, then they will be able to use UPI to, use funds from the credit line rather than actually apply for a credit line. And
Correct.
hence the risk and the underwriting that the banks are doing, and the KYC part that you mentioned very rightfully, how RBI is tightening the norms, will already have been taken care of in the bank's digital journey of onboarding a credit card user, or let's say a physical journey, whatsoever is the case. Essentially, UPI, credit on UPI will only be used to increase the utilization of the card.
So yes, correct. When it comes to the RuPay credit cards, already the issuing bank has done their due diligence before they've issued the card to the customer. But when it comes to the credit lines that they're building for these credit lines would probably be on the basis of their past UPI transaction data. So the hypothesis here is that a lot of new to credit customers or thin credit book customers would be able to benefit from this. Again, do they have the entire, the judicial? Are they judicious enough with the credit lines given? I don't know.
Understood. Understood.
But great point over there. I should have clarified. So thank you so much for raising that, Mohit.
Sure, thank you, Samantha.
All right. This has been a very great session for me today. And I'm so glad that, a lot of you could join me on stage as well. And it just made the entire conversation that much more lively. So thank you so much, everybody. And next week, I'm planning to do a little bit of a different kind of a FinTech Chronicler podcast where I plan to look into one of the companies one of the fintech companies that's recently released their quarterly earning reports, and from there kind of draw parallels to figure out what next could possibly be happening for the fintech industry. So if that interests you, then do stay tuned. And with that, thank you once again everyone for joining me, and I will see you next week.